is already in the middle of something in your life right now. And the question is not whether you believe that. The question is whether you are willing to stay long enough to see it finished. I want to pray before we go any further. If you are watching this and you are tired, if you have been fighting battles that nobody knows about, if you have been holding on to faith with your fingertips, I want you to type the word faithful in the comments right now. Because I believe God is about to speak specifically to somebody today about what it means to stay when everything inside you wants to leave. Let me take you somewhere. Let me take you to a garden, not the Garden of Eden. I want to take you to a garden in a place called Gethsemane. I want you to sit there for a minute because I think something is hiding in that garden that most people skip over to get to the resurrection. Most people want to get to the miracle without honoring the moment where the miracle was decided. But the moment it was decided is the part that changes your life. Because before the stone was rolled away, before the shout happened, before the dawn broke, there was a man on his knees, sweat falling like drops of blood, wrestling with the weight of what was ahead of him. And here is the part that wrecks me. He did not kneel in that garden because he did not feel the pressure. He knelt because he did. He was not pretending the cup was not heavy. He asked for it to be taken away. He felt the full weight of what was before him. And he still said, not my will, but yours be done. That was not weakness. That was the most powerful act of alignment in all of human history. And I need somebody to understand that what happened next, the betrayal, the trial, the cross, the 3 days of silence, none of that was a surprise to God. Every difficult moment that followed was held within the framework of a decision made in the dark. In the garden, when nobody was watching except the Father. That is the part I want to talk about today. That private moment, that hidden decision, that secret place of surrender. Because too many people are trying to build public lives on private avoidance. They want the resurrection without sitting in the garden. They want the victory without the wrestling. They want the testimony without the test. And I understand why. Because the garden is not glamorous. Nobody posts pictures from their garden moments. Nobody shares the version of themselves that is on their knees. I'm done asking God whether there is another way. But that is where it happens. That is where the most important thing in your life gets decided. And the controlling truth I want to build today is this. It was not the cross that proved who Jesus was. It was the garden. It was what happened in private, in the dark, under pressure. When his flesh was screaming one thing and his spirit was committed to another. The cross was only possible because the garden decision had already been made. Every public victory you have ever admired was first a private decision that nobody applauded. Sit with that. Because somebody listening to me right now is trying to produce a public result from a private life that has not been surrendered. You are praying for open doors while your private decisions are boarding up windows. You are asking God for more while privately negotiating with less. And I am not here to make you feel guilty about that. I am here to tell you that the garden is available to you right now. The same invitation that Jesus accepted in the dark is available to you today. But first, let me talk about what the garden actually is. The garden is not a physical location. The garden is any moment where you are alone with the truth about who you have been and who you are being called to become. It is the morning you wake up before anyone else is awake. And something inside you knows you cannot keep going the way you have been going. It is the season where life gets quiet enough for you to hear your own excuses clearly. It is the moment the comfort you have been hiding in starts to feel like a cage rather than a refuge. That is your garden. And here is what I know about gardens. Things grow there, but they also get pruned there. And pruning is not comfortable. Pruning feels like loss before it feels like growth. You do not understand what is being removed until you see what the removal made room for. But you cannot skip the pruning and still expect the fruit. Some of you are in a pruning season right now, and you have been calling it punishment. You have been calling it failure. You have been interpreting the cutting away as abandonment because you expected this season of your life to look different than it does. You expected more applause by now. You expected more visible progress by now. You expected more confirmation by now. And instead, life gave you quiet. Instead, life gave you the garden. And the enemy, he wants you to waste the garden. He wants you to spend your garden season scrolling, comparing, explaining yourself to people who were never assigned to understand your process, complaining about what you lost, rehearsing what went wrong, performing strength for public consumption while internally you are unraveling, because a wasted garden is a delayed resurrection. If you skip the surrender, you skip the power. Let me talk about what it costs to stay in the garden. When Jesus was there, his disciples fell asleep. The people who had traveled with him, eaten with him, witnessed miracle after miracle. They could not stay awake in the moment that mattered most. And I want to be careful here because I am not here to criticize the disciples. I think the disciples represent something we all understand. There are moments in your life, moments of critical spiritual weight, where the people closest to you are simply not equipped to carry what you are carrying. Not because they do not love you, but because this particular assignment was only ever between you and God. Some of you have been waiting for someone to keep watch with you in your garden. You have been delaying your surrender because you want company in the process. You want somebody to validate your pain, to confirm your direction, to wake up at midnight with you and say, I see it, I understand it, keep going. And there is nothing wrong with wanting that. But sometimes the garden is designed to be between you and the Father alone. Sometimes the depth of what God is producing in you requires a level of solitude that your community is not meant to enter. And if you are going to step into everything God has for your life, you are going to have to learn how to be faithful in private when everyone around you is asleep. You are going to have to learn how to stay committed when nobody is tracking your progress. You are going to have to learn how to make the garden decision. Not my will, but yours. Even when the witnesses are few. Because integrity is not built in crowds. Integrity is built in the garden. Let me bring this closer to your actual life right now. You have a garden. I do not know exactly what it looks like for you, but I know it exists. Maybe your garden is that conversation you keep avoiding, the one that needs to happen with a person you love. But fear has been convincing you that the timing is never right. Maybe your garden is that habit you have been medicating your pain with. The one you have prayed about 100 times and still keep returning to because the pain underneath it feels bigger than your faith some days. Maybe your garden is that dream God placed in you 3 years ago that you keep pushing to the edge of your to-do list because stepping toward it requires you to believe something about yourself that fear has been arguing against every single morning. Whatever your garden is, it has a threshold. And on one side of that threshold is comfort, familiarity, and the slow erosion of what you were made for. And on the other side of that threshold is the terrifying, beautiful, disorienting, life-altering decision to say yes to the version of yourself that God already sees when he looks at you. But here is the thing about the garden that I really need you to hear. Saying yes in the garden does not mean the road gets easier immediately. Jesus said yes in the garden. And the next thing that happened was betrayal. The next thing that happened was a trial. The next thing that happened was a cross. And if you do not understand this, You will misinterpret the difficulty that follows your surrender. You will think your yes was wrong because the road got harder. You will think God did not hear you because the pressure increased. You will interpret increased resistance as evidence of divine absence. And that is one of the enemy's favorite lies. The cross was not evidence that the garden was wasted. The cross was evidence that the garden was working. Stay with me, because this is the reframe that somebody needs today. You have been reading the hard season as a sign that you should stop. You have been reading the resistance as a closed door. You have been reading the silence as rejection. But what if the silence is Gethsemane? What if the pressure is just the Friday before Sunday? What if what feels like the end is actually the through? Because there is a difference between a dead end and a passage. And from the inside, they can look identical. Both of them feel like walls. Both of them feel like nowhere to go. Both of them feel like the road is over. But one of them has a door in it. And only the ones who stay long enough to push find it. Some of you have turned back too soon. You got to the wall and you called it the end. But it was not the end. It was the corridor to the next thing. And you will only know that if you stay. I know staying is hard. I know staying is the part nobody talks about when they celebrate people's success stories. They talk about the launch. They talk about the breakthrough. They talk about the moment everything changed. But they rarely talk about the 3 months before that moment when the person wanted to quit every single morning. They rarely talk about the private discipline that created the conditions for the public moment. They rarely talk about the garden. And I need you to understand that your staying is not invisible to God. Your staying is not going unnoticed in the spirit. Even when nobody around you is affirming the season you are in. Even when your own emotions are telling you that you are losing ground. Every act of faithfulness in the garden is being counted. Every morning you get up and choose to keep going. Every prayer you pray from a place of exhaustion. Every moment you choose your assignment over your comfort. God is not asleep. God is not unaware. The Father sees what the disciples missed. Let me show you something else about this story. When Jesus rose, the first announcement was not made in a palace. It was not made in the synagogue. It was not made to the religious leaders who had argued against his authority. The first announcement of resurrection was made in a garden to a woman who had been weeping, who had not stopped showing up even when she did not have a theology for what was happening. Mary Magdalene was there because she would not leave. She was there because love kept her in the proximity of what she could not yet explain. And the word of resurrection came to someone who stayed. It came to someone who was present in the grief, present in the confusion, present in the moment that felt like total loss. And the risen Christ spoke her name. And everything changed. I need you to hear this. The announcement of your breakthrough is going to find you near the place where you chose to stay. It is going to find you in the proximity of your assignment. It is going to find you in the discipline. It is going to find you in the faithfulness. It is going to find you in the garden. And that means the people who leave the garden early are not present for the announcement. They are somewhere else being comforted by lesser things, surrounding themselves with distractions, rebuilding walls of comfort, moving toward the familiar because the unfamiliar got too heavy. And the word arrives, and they have already walked away. Do not walk away from your garden. I want to talk about what the garden produces in you. Because this is where the modern application gets so specific it might make you uncomfortable. The garden produces a quality of faith that safety cannot manufacture. You cannot develop garden faith in comfortable seasons. Garden faith is the faith that says, I do not understand what is happening. I cannot feel my way forward. Every voice around me is asleep, and I am going to trust you anyway. That quality of faith cannot be conjured in the classroom. It cannot be produced in the highlight reel. It is built specifically and only in the place of private surrender. And when you come out of the garden having made that decision, you carry something that is unshakable. Not because you are no longer afraid, not because the road is now clear, but because you have already done the hardest thing. You have already chosen God over your own comfort in the most private possible moment. And that decision changes everything about how you move going forward. Some of you right now are in the early part of what will become one of the most powerful testimonies of your life. But from where you are standing, it does not look like a testimony. It looks like a mess. It looks like a mistake. It looks like a detour. It looks like evidence that things went wrong. But I need to tell you what I know about the God who meets people in gardens. He is not confused about where you are. He is not surprised by the timeline. He has not forgotten what he said to you. What you are in is not a punishment. It is a preparation. And preparation often feels indistinguishable from pain. Because preparation strips you of things you were relying on that you should not have been relying on. Preparation removes the props that were substituting for real strength. Preparation creates the conditions for authentic, tested, proven character. And character is what sustains you when the assignment gets large. Without it, public success becomes a liability. Without it, the door you prayed for becomes a door that is too heavy for the unprepared version of you to hold open. God is not withholding your future from you. God is building the version of you that your future requires. And here is the thing about that process. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes the garden work is quiet. Sometimes it looks like months of showing up to the same commitment without visible reward. Sometimes it looks like choosing your healing again and again in the small moments, not just the big breakthrough moments. Sometimes it looks like forgiving the same wound 7 times in a week, not because you feel like it, but because bitterness would cost you more than the wound ever could. Sometimes it looks like rebuilding your prayer life in a season when heaven feels silent, not because prayer feels powerful in that moment, but because the discipline of showing up is forming something in you that the silence cannot take away. This is the garden. This is the daily, repeated, mostly unwitnessed decision to stay. And when you stay, something happens. Not all at once, not in a way that announces itself loudly or immediately, but over time. The staying produces depth. The staying produces roots. And roots are what determine whether you survive the storm that inevitably comes. Because storms come for everyone. They do not discriminate between those who have it together and those who are still figuring it out. Storms test the foundation. And the only foundation that holds under pressure is the one that was built in the hidden places. In the garden, in the private, yes. I want to close with this. There is a version of your story that ends at the garden. There is a version where the wait was too much. The disciples fell asleep. The road looked too long. And you turned around. And I know why that version is tempting. I know why walking away from the hard thing can look like wisdom when it is actually retreat. I know why familiar comfort can feel like safety when it is actually limitation. I know why giving up on the garden can masquerade as self-preservation when it is actually self-abandonment. But there is another version of your story. In that version, you stay in that version. You say what Jesus said in that garden. Not my will, but yours. In that version. You stop negotiating with fear and you start obeying the Father. In that version, you stop waiting until your emotions cooperate and you start moving in the direction of your assignment. In that version, The garden produces something in you. The cross does not have the final word. Sunday arrives, and the thing that was buried comes back with power that no human being could manufacture or replicate or take away. I believe that version is available to you, not because you have it all together, not because you are without fear, not because every question has been answered, but because the same God who met Jesus in the garden is the God who is present with you in yours. And that God does not leave his people in the ground. He does not abandon his purpose in people who choose to stay. He does not waste the faithfulness of those who said yes in the dark. Your garden is not the end of your story. Your garden is where your story becomes undefeatable. The morning is coming. The stone is already moving. Do not leave before Sunday gets here.